Hey guys! Tonight we're slipping quietly into one of the most awkward and underappreciated jobs in history. The Medieval Mistress. Not the glamorous, pearl-wearing, palace-scheming fantasy you might have seen in TV dramas, but the real, actually trying to survive version. That means endless secrets, sweaty kings and lords sharing you around, and the constant risk of being replaced by someone's cousin. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this. Leave a comment telling me if you'd rather be a medieval mistress, or spend a week as a medieval peasant. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for some gentle white noise, pile up your pillows, and maybe tuck your feet in so no jealous wife from 1384 can bite your toes. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what a medieval mistress actually did all day? Was it all forbidden romance and mysterious gifts, or mostly drafty rooms, weird cheese, and trying not to die of boredom? Could you survive being a kept woman with no rights and even fewer good hair days? Was there actual power, or just a lot of weird food and even weirder rules? And honestly, where do you put your feelings when you're one political scandal away from a very angry mob? Congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 1372. You're someone's secret, but only because it's too embarrassing to call you an employee. You're not married, you're not a servant, and you definitely can't update your LinkedIn. Welcome to your new life as a medieval mistress. Good luck. You always dreamed of romance, but surprise, your new career path is mostly determined by whether your cousin married the local baron, or if your parents were particularly bad at gambling. No fairy godmother. Just a suggestive uncle and the worst career counsellor ever. Let's set the scene. You're 16, which in medieval years is basically retirement age for innocence. You're busy minding your own business, maybe helping your mother churn suspiciously chunky butter when a distant relative shows up at the door. He smells faintly of old wine, and he's grinning like someone who just found a gold coin in a dung heap. There's talk of a good opportunity, which is always code for we're out of money again, and suddenly you're being dressed in your Sunday best and shipped off to meet some nobleman you've never seen in daylight. Forget the modern idea of career planning. There's no personality test, no gap year, no passionate monologue about following your dreams. In fact, nobody cares about your dreams. Instead, your destiny is a three-way argument between your parents, your local priest, and a neighbour who once saw you catch a chicken without tripping over your own skirt. Congratulations, you're now considered qualified for high-stakes medieval romance. You arrive at the manor and quickly discover that recruitment is a generous word. The Lord Steward eyes you up and down like he's judging a melon at market, then asks if you can read, sew, or play the lute. Preferably all at once, but if not, can you at least keep quiet and look confused? That's apparently a valuable skill. If you're pretty, that's a bonus. If you're clever, that's a liability. Nobody likes a mistress who can outwit her employer. If you're both, well, good luck. The main requirement seems to be not currently married, reasonably quiet, and unlikely to embarrass the family at banquets. Think of it as a medieval version of a job interview, except the interviewer is always your aunt, and she's suspiciously invested in your prospects. Once you're selected, there's no orientation week. Nobody gives you a welcome packet, and the only onboarding gift is a thin wool cloak and an awkward talk from your mother about womanly mysteries delivered in a whisper, as if the walls themselves might blush. Your actual training consists of watching older girls get it wrong, and then trying to avoid the mistakes that got them banished to the nunnery. You might assume, based on all the poems and tragic songs, that this process is thrilling, a whirlwind of secret glances and roses thrown over balconies. In reality, it's mostly your father mumbling apologies and your mother packing you bread and a warning to never, under any circumstances, eat anything the cook describes as new and exciting. You say goodbye to your family and half your childhood, and get a lift on the back of a wagon full of turnips. When you arrive at your new home, you're greeted by an atmosphere that could charitably be described as tense. The servants watch you like you're the punchline to a joke they already know. The lady of the house is either suspiciously welcoming or practicing her dagger throwing behind closed doors. And the Lord, he's twice your age, inexplicably sunburnt, and has exactly the kind of mustache that says, "I make impulsive decisions." This is not a love story. This is medieval HR, and you just got promoted to mildly inconvenient. Nobody tells you the rules, but you quickly learn them. Don't be seen after sunset. Don't outshine the wife. And never ever get caught reading her letters, even if she leaves them in your favourite window seat. By the end of your first week, you've discovered that your new career is mostly about being available, being discreet, and pretending to enjoy long conversations about sheep taxes. If you're lucky, you get a necklace. If you're unlucky, you get a new nickname from the kitchen staff and a lifetime supply of existential dread. Welcome to the recruitment process. Please try not to make eye contact with the tapestry. Congratulations, you've just been invited to stay at the Lord's Manor. You arrive with a bundle of clothes, an awkward smile, and a sense that you should be reading the fine print. Spoiler, there isn't any. Let's set the mood. The manor itself looms on the horizon. Less castle, more oversized barn with delusions of grandeur. The front door opens and you're ushered in by a servant who manages to look both bored and mildly alarmed at the same time. Your first challenge? Navigating a grand hall so cold it could host an ice skating competition. You're not even sure where to put your hands, let alone your dignity. Day one is an endless parade of new faces and old furniture. There's the Lord, of course, smiling with all the confidence of a man who's never had to do his own laundry. His handshake is firm. His compliments are confusing. You look robust, good for winter. And you quickly realise he only remembers your name because someone wrote it down for him. Beside him, the lady of the house glides by, all frosty politeness and eyes sharp enough to slice cheese. She greets you with a smile that says, "Welcome, I'm watching you," before disappearing down a hallway with suspicious speed. You're shown to your new room, which is definitely not the guest suite. It's more of a closet with ideas above its station. There's a bed, a chair, and a tapestry depicting a heroic pig. Your window looks out onto the stables, so at least you'll always know when someone's cleaning up after the horses, about 10 minutes after sunrise, every single morning. The sheets smell faintly of old apples and despair. There's a wash basin, but no hot water. That's reserved for people who actually own land. The next few hours are an awkward game of what am I supposed to do now? There's no schedule, no manual, just a rotating cast of servants who pop in to drop hints about proper behaviour. Don't go into the blue parlour, don't speak to the lady unless spoken to. Never mention the time the Lord fell off his horse. You nod, file these instructions away, and then immediately forget which room is the blue parlour. Is it the one with all the blue, or is that a decoy? The pressure is real. Meals are a social obstacle course. At dinner you're seated at a small table slightly too close to the kitchen. You eat whatever is put in front of you. Mystery stew, aggressively stale bread, something the cook swears is turnip but you suspect is actually optimism. The Lord tries to make conversation, but it mostly involves lengthy stories about hunting accidents and what he calls the Great Eel Incident of 67. You laugh politely, which seems to encourage him, and before you know it you're knee-deep in a discussion about the proper way to salt a boar. The servants all have their own opinions about you, and none of them are shy about showing it. Some are cold, some are curious, and at least one calls you the new disaster when she thinks you can't hear. You discover quickly that your every move is observed, catalogued, and relayed to someone else before you've even finished making it. Your first attempt at a casual stroll around the manor is interrupted 3 times by people who just happen to be passing by. You try to find comfort in your new routine, but there isn't one yet. Mornings start with the world's earliest rooster. Days are a blur of sitting, standing, and pretending not to notice when the family argues about taxes in the next room. You attempt embroidery, only to stab your thumb and bleed on the linen. You try reading, but the only available book is in Latin, and the pictures are just monks scowling at goats. By the end of your first week, you've broken the ice, cracked the surface, and possibly chipped a tooth on the bread. You're still smiling, still awkward, and very much aware that this is not a fairy tale. It's a medieval test of endurance. But if you can survive this, you can survive anything. You expected silk and sapphires, but your gift box includes a lumpy mattress, a brooch that turns your neck green, and enough perfume to stun a goat. Also, good luck keeping any of it after the next argument. Let's open your starter pack together, shall we? First up, clothing. Somewhere between the poems and the paintings, you got the idea that mistresses lived draped in the finest silks, swanning around like royalty. In reality, your wardrobe is a chaotic heap of whatever was lying around the manor and didn't fit the lord's sister anymore. If you're lucky, there's a velvet gown, but the velvet is suspiciously crunchy, and the seams are one enthusiastic sneeze away from catastrophic failure. Every dress comes in exactly one size, someone else's. If it's too big, just cinch it with a belt made out of braided rags. If it's too small, congratulations, you're setting the next big trend in medieval circulation loss. Shoes? Forget about it. You get one pair and they are absolutely guaranteed to squeak in every silent hallway and pinch your toes into shapes not found in nature. Stockings are an upgrade, meaning they've only been darned twice, not 5 times. And as for undergarments, let's just say medieval fashion never quite figured out the value of comfort or personal boundaries. If you want something soft, your best bet is befriending the laundry maid or praying for an unusually generous festival day. Now, about those jewels. Yes, you may be presented with a necklace or a ring, possibly even a family brooch that's been through more drama than your average soap opera. Just be aware, every piece comes with its own risks. That sparkling gem might actually be coloured glass, and the clasp is an ancient little torture device that will bite you the moment you look confident in front of company. The green neck isn't a bug, it's a feature. A sort of medieval tattoo that says, "This was almost expensive." Rings leave stains, earrings pinch, and the minute your patron is in a mood, he'll ask for all of it back faster than you can say, "Forbidden romance." If you're feeling clever, you might stash a trinket or two for later. That's called planning ahead, and it's why some mistresses retire with at least one souvenir. The perfume situation deserves a chapter of its own. In the medieval world, scented is really just a polite word for overpowering. Your bottle contains a mixture of herbs, flowers, and something the apothecary described as animal essence. It's best applied sparingly, otherwise you risk being mistaken for an over-perfumed cheese wheel at dinner. The first time you put it on, everyone in a 6-foot radius sneezes, and the lord claims to love it, while the lady of the house quietly cracks a window. You'll learn quickly that the scent is more about masking the general aroma of castle life than actually smelling good. It's you versus mildew, wet dog, and last week's fish pie. Let's talk about your bed. You dreamed of feathers and silken pillows, but you get a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw and a blanket that's less luxurious and more medieval exfoliation treatment. The pillows are flat, the sheets are damp, and every night you share your sleeping space with the entire bug kingdom. Sometimes, if you're extra lucky, the mattress makes a delightful crinkling sound every time you turn over, alerting everyone in the next room that you're alive and profoundly uncomfortable. And then there are the rashes. Maybe it's the wool, maybe it's the perfume, maybe it's the aggressive embroidery on the collar of your only nice dress. One thing's for certain, if you weren't itchy before, you will be now. The medical answer, more perfume, or maybe a blessing from the local priest who will stare meaningfully at your exposed wrists and suggest less vanity in the future. Soothing lotion? Absolutely not. Just scratch, and hope the scabs heal by the next feast. By week's end, your starter pack is complete. 2 dresses, 1 pair of shoes, a handful of disappointing jewellery, a bottle of liquid regret, and a new appreciation for the simple beauty of not wearing anything at all. But hey, in the medieval world, even that comes with consequences, so pull on your scratchy gown, fix your green-stained necklace, and get ready to parade past the kitchen staff like you actually asked for any of this. Forget Netflix. Your new entertainment is memorizing which staircase creaks, which window faces the courtyard, and how many seconds you have to hide under a table if the wife comes home early. Your daily life as a medieval mistress isn't a whirlwind romance. It's a tactical operation that would put any modern spy movie to shame. The castle, for all its drafty charm and questionable decor, is a maze built for secrets. Your first real skill isn't seduction, it's situational awareness, knowing which corridor leads to the solar, which tapestry hides a door, and which room's floorboards are likely to betray you with a sound reminiscent of a dying goose. The secret rooms themselves? Less hidden love nest, more closet full of broken chairs and last year's pickled onions. If you're lucky, you'll get one with an actual lock. If you're unlucky, your private space is just a glorified alcove behind a moth-eaten curtain, shared with a few centuries' worth of dust and what might be an immortal spider. Privacy is always relative. The best you can hope for is a room that nobody wants to enter because it smells vaguely of turnip and old drama. And there's always a lurking threat. Surprise visits. The lady of the house is unpredictable, and you develop an almost supernatural awareness of her footsteps. Is that the clack of her shoes on stone, or just a passing servant? Better be safe. Time for a tactical roll under the sideboard. You'd win a gold medal in hide and seek if only the judges weren't so judgy. You learn that sometimes your best friend is a dusty velvet curtain, and your worst enemy is the echoing slap of your own panic-quickened heart. These rooms are less about romance and more about survival. You know exactly how many seconds you need to vanish if a suspicious silhouette appears in the hallway, usually about 8, unless you trip over a bucket or get tangled in someone's embroidery project. And then there's the windows. Some face the courtyard, great for scouting the comings and goings of your competition, read literally everyone else, but also perfect for being seen at the worst possible moment. Your entire life becomes a chess game, and the castle is the board. Only the pieces are alive, grumpy, and occasionally armed with pointy objects. Even when you're not actively hiding, you're playing defense. Doors that don't quite latch, floorboards that creak just as you're trying to slip out unnoticed, and the ever-present risk that someone's going to barge in just to check on the linen. You quickly realise that the servants know all the hiding spots. In fact, they probably invented half of them. Sometimes they help you out. A wink here, a cough there. Other times you get the sinking feeling they're running a betting pool on whether you'll make it back to your room without being spotted. It's not just people you're hiding from either. Letters, trinkets, and all the evidence of your existence as more than a guest have to be carefully stashed. You become an expert at camouflage, tucking love notes inside Bibles, jewellery in flour sacks, and forbidden snacks behind the loose stones in the hearth. Every day is a new episode of Can I Keep This Hidden? Spoiler, the answer is usually no. And let's not forget the occasional moment of sheer slapstick panic. The door swings open unexpectedly and you lunge for a hiding place, under a table, behind a tapestry, or, on one memorable occasion, into an empty laundry basket. You sit there, heart pounding, praying nobody notices the world's least convincing pile of linens is suspiciously breathing. After a while, it almost becomes a game. You perfect the art of moving silently, holding your breath at the right moments, and always keeping a plausible excuse handy. "Oh, I was just admiring the masonry" becomes your go-to line, even as you brush cobwebs from your hair. Living with secret rooms means you're never fully relaxed, but if you can laugh about it later, it almost counts as entertainment. It's not exactly the life you imagined, but it does keep you on your toes and out of sight when it matters most. Every meal is a minefield. Sometimes you're invited to dine with the household. Sometimes you eat in a closet. Always, someone is pretending not to notice you, especially the kitchen staff. Let's start with the seating chart, which changes daily and is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside a slightly mouldy bread roll. Are you important enough today to sit near the Lord, or are you going to be tucked behind a curtain with a tray balanced on your lap, pretending not to hear the heated discussion about sheep tithes happening on the other side of the wall? There's no memo, no helpful place card, and absolutely no chance anyone will explain the logic. You just hover awkwardly at the edge of the hall until someone gestures vaguely, and you scramble to your designated spot like a confused squirrel at a banquet. When you do get to sit at the main table, it's a masterclass in subtle tension. The Lord is usually in high spirits, telling stories and waving his knife around for emphasis. The lady of the house, meanwhile, has a smile so sharp it could slice the roast. Conversation flows like cold gravy, slow, congealing, and likely to stick to your soul. No matter what you say, it's wrong. If you compliment the food, you're accused of flattery. If you don't, the cook glares daggers from the doorway and you'll find mysterious grit in tomorrow's porridge. There are unspoken rules everywhere. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat too fast or too slow. Don't look too happy about the roasted pigeon or too sad about the boiled turnips. Don't, under any circumstances, take the last piece of bread unless you want to be the subject of kitchen gossip for a week. One false move and you're the greedy mistress or the silent one, or, worst of all, the one who laughed when the Lord spilled his mead. Medieval households have long memories. On days when you're not summoned to the table, you get your meal in a much humbler setting. The cosy linen closet, the echoey stairwell, or, on special occasions, a bench in the scullery next to a suspiciously sentient pile of potatoes. Here you learn to eat with one hand and shoo off chickens with the other. If the staff like you, they'll sneak you the best slice of cheese, or warn you which stew is more bone than meat. If they don't, well, hope you like crusts and whatever fell behind the chopping block last Thursday. Being a mistress means being everyone's favourite topic and nobody's favourite guest. The kitchen staff pretend you're invisible, unless you're standing in their way, in which case you're suddenly the most inconvenient object in the universe. You become a sort of culinary ghost, present but never acknowledged, like a garnish no one ordered. If you're lucky, the cook will slip you a wink when she ladles out the soup. If you're not, she'll accidentally drop the ladle on your foot. Food itself is an adventure. Some days you dine on roast meats and pastries stuffed with actual fruit, not just hopes and dreams. Other days, your main course is bread so hard you could use it as a weapon. Everything comes with a generous side of tension. Is the pie meant to be shared? Is the cheese safe to eat? Or is it just for decoration? Will you get through the meal without a servant dropping a not-so-subtle comment about some people who weren't born to table manners? You learn to eat quickly but quietly, to listen more than you talk and to never ever ask for seconds. Your goal is to blend in so well that nobody remembers you were there at all. When the meal is over, you slip away, hoping nobody noticed your presence, or your absence. By your third awkward dinner, you realise that medieval dining isn't about the food or even the company. It's about survival, making it to dessert without becoming tomorrow's gossip, and mastering the fine art of being both seen and unseen. Dining like you're invisible. Congratulations, you're already a pro. Your options are cold water, borrowed soap, and the vague hope that you smell less offensive than last week's cheese. Showers are a myth. Baths are a quarterly miracle. Let's talk about washing up. A pastime in the medieval world only slightly more common than jousting, and probably more dangerous. Your daily hygiene routine goes something like this. Splash your face with water so cold it might as well have come straight from the glaciers. Pat yourself down with a cloth that's seen better centuries, and hope no one's standing too close at breakfast. There is no hot tap. There is, however, a bucket that's been sitting in the corner of your room, collecting a suspicious amount of dust and existential dread. Soap is a prized commodity. Sometimes it's made from animal fat, ashes, and something that probably died twice. If you're very, very fortunate, you'll be allowed to borrow a bar from the laundry maid, which comes with a warning not to use too much or you'll ruin the finish. The soap is so harsh it doubles as paint remover, but at least you feel a little less like a walking wheel of brie. Don't even ask about conditioner. Your hair is on its own journey now, and the destination is somewhere between dried haystack and historical artifact. A bath is less of a routine and more of a community event. Word gets out that the mistress is bathing, and suddenly every servant in the manor has business nearby. The bath itself is a large wooden tub, usually set in front of the fireplace for maximum draught. and filled with water that's lukewarm if you're lucky, freezing if you're not. It takes hours to fetch and heat enough water, so you're expected to be both efficient and grateful. By the time you step in, you're being watched by an audience of bored housemaids and one very judgmental cat. Privacy? Not even once. Quarterly baths, yes, quarterly, are the high point of personal cleanliness. In between, you rely on spit baths, herbal sachets, and, if you're feeling extra brave, a spritz of medieval perfume, which, as we've already established, is a gamble at best. It's less about smelling nice and more about outstinking everyone else. This truly is the original arms race. Then there's the matter of dental hygiene, or, as it's known in the manor, wishful thinking. Toothbrushes haven't been invented yet, but twigs and bits of linen are chewed in a desperate attempt to remove the taste of last night's eel stew. Sometimes you rinse your mouth with wine. Practical and surprisingly effective, if only because it makes you forget what your breath smells like. If you're lucky, the kitchen has parsley or mint. If you're unlucky, it's a stale crust or nothing at all. Kissing the Lord is now a daring act of mutual trust and shared delusion. Laundry is also a test of your patience and resolve. The manor's washing process involves a cauldron of boiling water, lye, more of that abrasive soap, and an enthusiastic beating against rocks or boards. Your favourite gown starts out blue and ends up a mysterious shade of brownish mauve. Every time your clothes are cleaned, they lose a little more of their will to live. So most of the time, you don't wash them at all. The logic is simple. Dirt protects against cold, and too much washing will wear out your only dress before your next promotion. If all else fails, you can always count on the castle's prevailing aroma to cover your tracks. Between the open hearth, the stables, the kitchen, and that one mystery puddle in the hallway, everyone smells faintly of smoke, livestock, and regret. The only way to truly stand out is to smell worse than the cheese cellar, and even that is a moving target. So you survive, one icy splash at a time, dreaming of future centuries with plumbing, scented soaps, and something called shampoo. Until then, you embrace the aroma of regret and pray that nobody's nose is as sharp as their tongue. Days stretch endlessly. Needlework, reading bad poetry, or staring at tapestries you're not allowed to touch. Your greatest enemy. Crushing, soul-numbing tedium. You might think being a medieval mistress was all dramatic intrigue and whispered secrets, but most of the time, it's just you, your thoughts, and a half-finished embroidery project that's starting to resemble a lopsided goat. The days are long, and there are only so many ways you can arrange your four possessions before someone accuses you of plotting a coup. After all, not every moment is a candlelit rendezvous. In fact, most moments are so dull you'd welcome a minor scandal just for a change of pace. Your day begins with a rooster crowing, which you're convinced is a subtle form of psychological warfare. Breakfast comes and goes, and then nothing. The lord is out hunting, the lady is taking the air, which is code for avoiding you, and the servants are all deeply committed to ignoring your presence unless you're standing in front of the only sunny window. You contemplate reading, but the only available book is a heavy volume of religious commentary in Latin, and the illustrations are mostly saints glaring at livestock. So instead, you stare at the tapestry across the room, counting how many unicorns seem to be judging you. Needlework is the time-honoured solution to boredom, but after 3 hours your fingers are cramped, and you've developed a new respect for anyone who can stitch a straight line. Your attempts at a floral pattern end with something that could generously be described as abstract. Occasionally a maid will glance over, frown, and offer to fix your work, which is how your humble rose garden transforms into a battlefield overnight. If you're feeling brave, you try a bit of poetry. Most of it is dreadful, rhyming heart with a part and then cart, and not even the house cat seems impressed. Socialising is not much better. You're technically above the servants, but not actually allowed to join in their gossip. If you try to start a conversation, the room goes quiet and someone remembers urgent business in the scullery. The other nobles are busy with their own boredom, which usually involves loudly discussing politics or playing chess games that last for days, and end in polite accusations of cheating. You try to sit in on a lute lesson, but the instrument has only 2 strings left, and one is being used to hold up a curtain. Every now and then there's a flurry of excitement, a visitor arrives, a festival looms, or someone drops a jug in the hallway. For a brief, glorious moment, you're included in the conversation until someone remembers you're technically not supposed to be here. You're sent back to your room with a leftover biscuit and strict instructions not to touch the silverware. Again. With so much time on your hands, you become an expert in creative distractions. You invent new games like Guess Which Corridor is Haunted and How Many Mice Are Living Under the Floorboards. You watch dust motes in the sunlight and try to predict their movements. You practice facial expressions in the mirror for your next run-in with the lady of the house. Polite indifference is your best so far. On particularly desperate afternoons, you even consider cleaning your own room, but decide against it after discovering what lurks beneath the bed. The worst part is that boredom is contagious. If you so much as yawn during dinner, it's a scandal. Someone accuses you of being melancholy. And the next thing you know, you're being offered herbal teas and stern lectures about the dangers of idleness. Apparently, too much free time leads to unladylike thoughts, and possibly witchcraft, so it's safer for everyone if you just stick to needlework and staring out the window. And so, you soldier on day after identical day, finding meaning in the smallest events and counting the hours until something, anything, breaks the monotony. Welcome to the real medieval drama. A battle not with dragons, but with the endless, creeping fog of boredom. You're never alone. Every wall has ears, every servant has an opinion, and your secrets travel faster than the plague. Trust no one, especially the lady's maid with the suspiciously good memory. The first thing you learn as a medieval mistress isn't how to flutter your lashes or arrange your shawl just so. It's how to survive the relentless, invisible blizzard of gossip. There are no closed doors here, only thresholds where conversations pause and every whispered word is a pebble thrown into the ever-expanding pond of castle rumours. If you thought your old village was bad, with its weekly debates over who really owns that one goat, you're about to experience medieval surveillance at an Olympic level. You discover quickly that privacy is just a fancy concept imported from the future. The minute you walk into a room, heads bow, but ears perk up. The scullery maid is suddenly rearranging spoons near your elbow, the stable boy lingers a little too long outside your window, and that ancient steward, who claims to be half deaf, has a miraculous ability to repeat your quietest complaints verbatim at the next dinner. You learn to speak in code, to smile at questions, and to always check behind curtains before you say anything important. The kitchen is the beating, rumour-filled heart of the manor. If something happens upstairs, the cooks will know before you finish blinking. They claim it's because good kitchens run on good information, but it's mostly because someone is always listening at the door, conveniently basting a goose or looking for more onions. One passing sigh from you about the Lord's new haircut, and by breakfast it's become a story about how you demanded he shave his head and join a monastery. It isn't just servants who fuel the gossip engine. The other nobles and visiting merchants are experts at turning the most innocent details into high drama. Your new shoes? Clearly a sign of favouritism and impending scandal. A faint bruise on your wrist? By supper, the story's morphed into a tale of wild passion, clumsy fencing, or, best of all, a run-in with a jealous alchemist's assistant. If you sneeze at the wrong moment, half the manor will believe you're cursed by Friday. And then there's the spying. You're pretty sure at least half the staff have been conscripted into some kind of informal intelligence agency. The lady's maid, in particular, is a master of the silent ambush. She'll appear behind you with a broom in hand just as you're whispering something you wish you hadn't. Her face is blank. Her nods are slow, and you know, deep in your bones, that she remembers everything. You start to wonder if she's keeping a journal just to read aloud at your trial when everything goes wrong. Sometimes it feels like you're starring in an absurd high-stakes play where every minor slip will be reviewed by a jury of kitchen maids, footmen and horses, You try to outsmart them, changing your routines, giving false hints, or even staging accidental conversations just to see what gets back to you. The results? Mixed. Somehow, you're always a few steps behind the gossip grapevine. Of course, gossip isn't always about you. Sometimes it's a weapon you can use carefully. You might slip a harmless rumour about a rival, or let it be known that you're just here for the embroidery. But even this is risky. The story you start rarely ends the way you intend. Today you're pretending to be bored by politics. Tomorrow you're somehow running for Queen of Navarre, all because someone misheard quilt as coup. Eventually you become fluent in the art of appearing dull. You learn that being interesting is dangerous, that silence is a shield, and that secrets are best kept in your own head. You give nothing away, especially to the lady's maid whose memory is almost supernatural, and whose smile, frankly, gives you nightmares. By the end of your first month, you're an expert in trust issues. You don't just sleep with one eye open, you live that way, always listening, always second-guessing. Because in the world of medieval mistresses, being interesting is hazardous, and being careless is fatal. And the only thing that spreads faster than the plague is the story of the last girl who forgot. Sometimes she ignores you. Sometimes she's terrifyingly polite. Sometimes she throws a candlestick. You never know if you're getting a compliment or a dagger in the back. In the medieval manner, your most unpredictable weather system isn't outside, it's the lady of the house. She sweeps down hallways with an air of chilly serenity, her face a mask carved from marble and old grudges. You never quite know what you're going to get. She might pass you in the corridor with a gentle "good morning," or she might offer a pointed "nice dress," while eyeing the hem like it's crawling with fleas. The suspense alone could power the castle's moat. Your relationship is built on the delicate art of mutual non-acknowledgement. Most days she glides past you as if you're a particularly drafty bit of wall. She can be so icy that even the local ghosts take notes. Then, just as you start to relax, she appears at your door with a tray of cakes. A peace offering, she says, which somehow makes them feel more like an ultimatum in pastry form. You eat one. You survive. But you can't help wondering if she's testing her apothecary's latest recipe. When she's in a good mood, which is rare and always suspicious, she will ask about your day in a way that feels less like conversation and more like reconnaissance. You reply with vague pleasantries, "Lovely weather we're having," or "the embroidery is coming along." She nods, but you sense she's filing away every detail, building a mental dossier for use at an unspecified future date. In fact, she knows everything. Who's been sneaking jam tarts from the kitchen, who left muddy footprints in the blue parlour, and exactly how much time you spent in the Lord's study last Tuesday. Of course, her compliments are the most dangerous of all. She'll say, "That colour suits you," but there's a flash in her eyes that says, "I know you borrowed that dress from my cousin." Or she'll mention how peaceful the manor is lately, which means you should expect a week of silent treatment, interrupted only by the sound of passive-aggressive lute playing from the solar. You become a connoisseur of subtext, reading hidden messages in every syllable. By week 3, you can interpret the meaning of a raised eyebrow at 50 paces. On her bad days, you'd rather be anywhere else. There's the icy silence, the too loud discussions about loyalty and virtue during dinner, and, on special occasions, the creative use of household objects as projectiles. Candlesticks, books, a decorative jug, nothing is off limits when the mood strikes. After the first flying candlestick, you learn to duck instinctively when she enters the room with anything heavier than a handkerchief. Sometimes, though, there's a moment of unexpected camaraderie. Maybe she's tired, or maybe she just needs someone to listen to her complain about her husband's hunting stories. You sit together in the window seat, sipping weak tea and pretending the world outside is less complicated than it is. For a few minutes, you're almost friends. Almost. Then someone walks by, and the frost returns. You both stand, straighten your dresses, and pretend you are never on the same side at all. The truth is, you're rivals by default, but your fates are tied together more tightly than the laces on your stays. You're both stuck in a system built on secrets, suspicions, and the constant possibility of disaster. She can't get rid of you without causing a scandal, and you can't get too comfortable or you'll end up in a nunnery with nothing but a cautionary tale for company. Navigating this relationship requires nerves of steel, the patience of a saint, and a sixth sense for incoming candlesticks. You walk the line between respectful deference and wary self-preservation. A single misstep, and you'll know about it, usually via passive aggression, but occasionally via flying crockery. So you watch, you wait, and you weather her moods like a seasoned sailor rides out a storm, because in this house, the lady is both your greatest threat and your strangest ally, a mortal frenemy you'll never fully understand and never ever underestimate. Be witty but not clever. Be beautiful but not threatening. Be interesting but don't have opinions. It's a little like being a medieval jester, but with more existential dread. No one gave you a written job description when you became a mistress, but if they had, it would read like the world's most confusing riddle, one where every answer is also wrong. Your primary role: be a source of amusement, admiration, and maybe just a pinch of jealousy. But not so much that you upset the balance of the household. The line between a delightful companion and social hazard is thinner than the wine at a Lenten feast. Every day you perform a delicate dance of conversation. You're meant to be lively, but only within the boundaries of what the Lord finds charming and what the lady finds ignorable. Tell a joke, and if it lands well, you get a fleeting smile from across the table. If it goes wrong, the silence thickens, and the kitchen staff will be whispering about it before you've swallowed your last bite of pottage. Your wit must never rise above your station. Cleverness is dangerous. People start to wonder what else you might be clever about. You learn quickly that rhetorical questions are best reserved for moments when nobody is listening. Your appearance is also part of the job, always just so, but not so that you risk eclipsing anyone more legitimate. Your hair should look naturally lovely, as though you simply woke up that way after a night spent reciting poetry, instead of staring at the ceiling and thinking about property law. Too much effort, and it's suspicious. Too little, and you're accused of letting yourself go. There's an entire cottage industry of maids, aunts, and well-meaning acquaintances offering unsolicited advice about how to walk, smile, and even breathe in a way that's pleasant but not provocative. By the end of week 2, you're an expert at looking accidentally beautiful on purpose. What about conversation? You must be interesting, but never too original. Share a story from your childhood, but edit out the embarrassing parts, the political parts, and definitely the parts that involve anyone currently in the room. Have opinions, quiet, safe ones. For every statement, add a little disclaimer. Of course, what would I know? Ask questions about hunting, falconry, or the weather, and pretend to care deeply about the answers. The Lord expects admiration, and the lady expects invisibility. You must deliver both, sometimes in the same sentence. There are moments when your job description slides dangerously close to that of a court jester, minus the hat and with more existential dread. Your laughter is expected, but it must never be the loudest in the room. You might be asked to play music, recite poetry, or provide commentary on the latest local scandal. Just remember, never be the one who laughs at the wrong joke or sings the wrong song. And definitely don't mention anything about that time the Lord's hawk mistook his wig for a rabbit. Once was enough. If you do your job too well, you're in trouble. Suddenly everyone is watching you, and not in a good way. If you don't do it well enough, you're in a different kind of trouble. Sidelined, ignored, or politely suggested as a candidate for a quiet country retreat. There's a sweet spot you must find and cling to, like a shipwrecked sailor clutching driftwood. By the end of your first month, you've mastered the art of being engaging but forgettable, alluring but never threatening, and always, always less memorable than the family silver. You are the life of the party, provided nobody notices you after the music stops. Your entire existence is a balancing act, performed on a tightrope of shifting expectations and polite unspoken threats. It's a strange job, being both the entertainment and the wallpaper, and you do it all with a smile, never letting the existential dread show. at least not until you're safely alone, practicing next week's smile in the flickering candlelight. Every present is a double-edged sword, jewellery, dresses, or on unlucky days a goat. If the relationship goes south, so does your stuff. Medieval lords love a gift with conditions. Let's talk about presents, those glittering tokens of affection that are supposed to make you feel special, but in reality come with more strings than a harp. The first time you're handed a small velvet-lined box, you feel a little thrill. Maybe it's a pearl necklace, maybe a golden brooch, maybe just a very shiny rock that the Lord insists is from the Holy Land. Whatever it is, you're expected to gasp appropriately and display your gratitude with a polite, slightly overwhelmed smile. Congratulations, you're now the proud owner of medieval emotional collateral. Of course, some gifts are actually useful. A nice dress means you finally have something clean to wear for dinner that isn't 3 inches too short. A silver ring is a sign of favour, just as long as nobody else sees you wearing it and starts whispering about who's the real lady of the house. Every new trinket gets you noticed, but not always in the good way. Wear too many at once, and you're accused of showing off. Wear none, and you're accused of being ungrateful. There's a careful balance between appreciative companion and future museum exhibit. But every gift carries a message. The more valuable the present, the heavier it feels. A new cloak? Wonderful, but also a clear signal. You belong to me. The Lord's gifts aren't just generosity. They're a ledger, a way of tracking your value and your loyalty. Each piece is a reminder that your status is conditional. If you make the wrong move, say, smile too warmly at a visiting merchant or accidentally spill wine on the lady's favourite tapestry, you may find those pearls unceremoniously taken back, right along with your best pillow. Then there are the less glamorous gifts. One day it's a jar of imported jam or an embroidered handkerchief. The next it's a goat tied outside your door with a note that says, "For your health." Now you have to feed, clean and explain your new livestock companion to every passing servant. You can't refuse the gift. Refusing is its own insult. So you smile, thank the Lord, and try to look like you always wanted a goat in your bedroom. Sometimes the gifts are more about convenience than affection. Is the Lord travelling? Here's a new comb and some scented oil. Don't forget who gave them to you. Is he in a foul mood? You might get a slightly bruised apple with a muttered apology. Occasionally you'll be given something that's clearly regifted. A ring that once belonged to someone else. A dress that fits suspiciously well for newly tailored. The only thing more awkward than getting a used gift is running into its previous owner at dinner. And then there's the matter of returns. If things ever sour, if the relationship cools, or you're replaced by someone with fancier hair ribbons, all those lovely things you've been given are suddenly subject to repossession. A trusted servant appears at your door, gently hinting that the silver hairpin would look better on the Lord's next favourite. The jewellery is gone, the dresses vanish, and you're left with the sentimental treasures, a cracked mirror, a comb missing half its teeth, and a goat who's only loyal to your bread crusts. Worse yet, the gossip doesn't stop at the gifts themselves. Every present is dissected by the household. Who got the best necklace? Did you really deserve that velvet cloak? Someone always claims they heard you begged for that silver ring, or that you gave it away in a fit of temper. You become the unwitting star of a drama called Who Deserves What, performed daily in the kitchens and corridors. So you learn to appreciate the gifts, but not too much. Keep the tokens of favour close, but be ready to part with them at a moment's notice. And above all, remember, in the medieval world, nothing is truly free, especially when it comes wrapped in silk and a generous helping of conditions. The only thing you can really keep is your sense of humour. And if you're careful, maybe the goat. One wrong word and you're the talk of the castle. Nobles plot, rivals whisper, and you're just hoping not to be the next cautionary tale for visiting priests. Let's start with the basics. Court life isn't just about feasts and falconry. It's a full contact sport, one that's less about jousting and more about surviving a never-ending tournament of eye contact, implied threats, and weaponized compliments. From the moment you step through the manor doors, You're not just a mistress, you're an accidental player in a high-stakes chess game where most of the pieces are out to knock you off the board. Every conversation is a potential trap. Ask the wrong question at dinner, and suddenly you're the subject of a week's worth of speculation. Comment on the weather? Someone will accuse you of secret messages about harvest taxes. Say nothing, and you're mysterious, which is code for definitely plotting something, probably with the cook. Even your silences become suspicious. It's a world where people can start a rumour simply by raising an eyebrow, and then deny everything by blaming it on the breeze. You quickly discover that alliances are forged and broken over less than a loaf of bread. That noble woman who seemed so friendly. She's probably the same one who'll casually mention your name in connection with Lord Geoffrey's missing signet ring. The visiting merchant who always has a smile. He's collecting secrets faster than the steward collects unpaid debts. The local priest, meanwhile, is taking mental notes for his next sermon on moral decay. You become an expert in reading subtext, scanning every conversation for hidden meaning, and smiling through gritted teeth while someone hints loudly about outsiders. It's not just talk either. There are rituals, unspoken rules, and a complicated hierarchy built entirely out of ego and ancient grudges. Enter a room the wrong way. You've insulted 3 generations. Wear the wrong colour at a feast. Clearly a signal that you're aligning with house discontent. Take a second helping of pears? Scandalous. Now everyone knows you favour foreign luxury, and someone will probably write a ballad about your dangerous appetite for imported fruit. Rival mistresses, ambitious cousins, and even bored ladies-in-waiting all have their own agendas. They'll test you with questions disguised as small talk. Don't you find the Lord's hunting habits a little extravagant? Or, did you hear what the kitchen boy saw near the East Tower? Every answer you give becomes tomorrow's headline, usually warped beyond recognition. In the medieval rumour mill, you're either a tragic heroine or a villainous upstart, sometimes both before breakfast. The real masters of this world are the ones who know how to stay invisible when it matters, and unforgettable when it counts. You practice nodding at the right moments, laughing at jokes you don't understand, and keeping your opinions locked up tighter than the family silver. If you must speak, make sure it's bland, vague, and complimentary. Never pick a side, never offer advice, especially about anything to do with money, inheritance, or the correct way to serve eel pie. Of course, even your survival strategies can backfire. Spend too much time being agreeable, and people wonder what you're hiding. Get too close to power, and you're labelled an influence. If you withdraw, you're clearly plotting to poison someone's stew. There's no winning, only managing the odds, like playing medieval roulette with your reputation as the bull. You develop instincts faster than a hunted rabbit. Learn who to trust, answer no one, when to speak, almost never, and how to excuse yourself from a conversation before it turns into an inquisition. Master the art of looking harmless but never clueless, interested but never too interested, available but never desperate. By the end of your first month, you're still standing, a little wiser, a lot more cautious, and possibly with a new grey hair or two. Congratulations, you've survived court politics 101, and if you're lucky, you'll make it to the next feast without starring as the tragic subject of a cautionary priestly rant. In the end, you're not just surviving court, you're learning how not to die by 1,000 paper cuts, whispered rumours, and accidental etiquette crimes. Sure, velvet looks nice until it's infested with fleas. And don't even get started on the lace. Medieval high fashion is a health hazard, and a punchline waiting to happen. There's a reason nobody wrote love poems about the realities of wardrobe maintenance in the Middle Ages. As a mistress, you're expected to embody taste and elegance, but elegance in this era is less about effortless beauty and more about surviving your own clothing. If you ever dreamed of striding through candlelit halls, your gown shimmering in the firelight, now's the time to lower your expectations and maybe start a personal flea census. Let's start with velvet, the ultimate status symbol. It's soft, it's luxurious, and it's a flea's favourite penthouse. You slip on your best dress for a banquet, determined to look irresistible, but the moment you sit down, something tickles your leg. A second later, you're trying to suppress an undignified itch that threatens to out you as less lady and more livestock. You do your best to remain statuesque while discreetly shifting in your seat, and you pray the only thing moving faster than your hand is the gossip about Lady Maud's questionable soup recipe. If velvet is the king of problems, lace is its conniving advisor. Handmade, delicate and expensive, lace is also incredibly impractical. It snags on everything: wooden benches, candlestick holders, your own fingernails. Even the cat takes one look and decides your sleeve is the ideal place for a nap and a casual round of claw sharpening. Don't even bother trying to keep your lace clean. After one meal in the Great Hall, you'll have gravy, wine, and probably the lingering aroma of fish for the next month. And then there's the matter of colours. You're encouraged to wear rich hues, deep blues, crimsons, golds, anything to show you're favoured, fashionable, and worth envying. Unfortunately, medieval dyes are a chemical experiment with a side of medieval optimism. That gorgeous burgundy gown, it runs at the slightest hint of moisture, a light drizzle, a spilled goblet, or a rogue teardrop, and suddenly your arms are streaked like an undercooked turnip tart. That blue you loved, it fades to grey by next week and matches your mood by the time you're 3 feasts in. Fashion doesn't end at your dress. Accessories are their own ordeal. Your one good necklace has a clasp that takes a team of 3 and a prayer to fasten. Bracelets pinch, rings leave green stains, and hair ribbons have an uncanny ability to untie themselves at the worst moments, usually right as the Lord's wife is walking by, taking note of every fraying end. And don't forget the shoes. Oh, the shoes. Leather so stiff it could double as armour, soles so thin you feel every cobblestone, and a toe box designed to be both pointy and entirely unaccommodating to actual human feet. If you're lucky, you only get a new blister for every important event. If you're not, you leave a small blood trail from the banquet table back to your secret room, medieval breadcrumb style. Of course, none of this is helped by the fact that your dresses are never really yours. They're borrowed, re-borrowed, and sometimes altered so many times you're not sure which original owner's perfume is still lingering in the seams. The household staff will always have opinions about your fashion sense, and you can be sure at least one of them is quietly rooting for you to trip over your train in front of the entire noble assembly. By the end of your first month, you've accepted that looking good is an occupational hazard. You walk with grace and a faint limp, smile through the itching, and treat every rip, stain or blood spot as just another badge of survival. High fashion in medieval times? It's itchy, risky, and always worth a laugh, at least once you've stopped scratching long enough to see the humour. Some days you eat like royalty. Some days you're gnawing on black bread, praying it's not another eel pie. Bonus points if you can identify what's moving in your stew. Let's begin with the highs. Those rare, glimmering feasts where the tables groan under the weight of roasted meats, honey-glazed pastries, and enough spiced wine to make even the most devout monk consider a career change. You walk into the great hall and, for a fleeting moment, forget all your troubles. The smell alone is enough to make you weep with joy, assuming the spices haven't already triggered a sneezing fit. These feasts are social events wrapped in poultry skins and sprinkled with almonds. You're expected to look radiant, eat delicately, and laugh at the Lord's jokes, even if they involve turnips and the tragedy of flatulence. But here's the catch. You don't always make the guest list. Sometimes you're paraded at the high table like a prize falcon. Other times, you're gently encouraged to take your tray into the hallway, where the meal is colder, the bread harder, and the seating suspiciously close to the draughty door. On fast days, which seem to come around more often than not, the menu takes a nosedive. Meat is forbidden, which sounds noble until you realise the alternative is pottage, a dish that appears to be vegetable mush flavoured with disappointment. If you're lucky, someone's thrown in a parsnip. If not, you'll be chewing on something that's technically edible and emotionally devastating. Now, let's talk about eel. Eel is everywhere. Eel in pie, eel in soup, eel on toast. If it fits in a pot and vaguely resembles a snake, someone in the medieval kitchen has figured out how to disguise it as dinner. It's not that it tastes terrible, though it does. It's that it's a culinary jump scare. You never know where it will appear. Just when you think you're biting into a perfectly normal meat pasty, bam! Eel ambush. The only people who seem to enjoy it are the ones who've built up a spiritual tolerance or lost their sense of taste in a tragic seasoning accident. Speaking of surprises, medieval stew is less a recipe and more a vague suggestion. It simmers in a pot all day, gathering contributions from every corner of the kitchen. Bits of onion, yesterday as bread, a questionable root vegetable, and something that might have been chicken if it hadn't been so mysterious about its feathers. You stare into the bowl, trying to identify the contents by shape or colour, but end up deciding it's better not to know. If it's chewy, swallow quickly. If it crunches, pray it was intentional. Food preservation is also an adventure. Salt is your best friend and your worst enemy, because while it keeps meat safe, it also gives it the texture of medieval shoe leather and the salt content of the Dead Sea. Cheeses range from mildly funky to clearly alive, and if you find mould, the correct response is not horror, it's scraping. And let's not forget fish days, which are somehow worse than fast days. You think you're being treated to a nice trout, but it's actually dried herring that's been soaked in ale and pessimism. The desserts are deceptive too. Yes, there's the occasional honey tart or preserved fig, but more often you'll be offered a treat made of flour, lard, and wishful thinking. You nod and smile while trying to chew it without losing a filling you didn't know you had. Even fruit is suspect. If it's fresh, it's a miracle. If it's stewed, it's unrecognisable. And if it's offered by the lady of the house, it may come with more strings attached than a court lute. So you eat what you're given, pretend to enjoy it, and learn to tell convincing lies about how nutritious everything tastes. In the medieval world, survival isn't just about fending off gossip or surviving secret rooms. It's about making peace with the fact that dinner might fight back. Bon appétit. Your main form of communication is love letters that double as legal disclaimers. Every stanza is one more chance to accidentally start a war. Writing a love note in the medieval world is not for the faint of heart. It's a delicate exercise in calligraphy, code, and caution. Every ink-stained word must balance on the fine line between romantic devotion and treasonous intent. A compliment too bold might be interpreted as a challenge. A metaphor too obscure could spark a theological debate. You start to understand why poets of the time were often broke, single, or mysteriously vanished. The first challenge? Materials. Parchment is expensive and ink stains everything, including your hands, sleeves, and the one decent dress you were saving for dinner. You write using a quill so temperamental it might qualify as a sentient being. Your handwriting must be graceful but unreadable to anyone but the intended recipient. Ideally legible enough to be flattering, but cryptic enough to escape detection by curious servants or nosy priests. Heaven forbid anyone confuse your heartfelt ode with a land dispute. Again, next comes the tone. You want to sound affectionate but not overly attached. Passionate but not scandalous. Honest, but with plausible deniability. Phrases like, "My heart aches in your absence," must be carefully hedged with something like, "in the manner of brotherly affection," just in case someone decides to read it aloud at the dinner table. Every love letter is essentially a romantic puzzle box. Sweet nothings wrapped in plausible somethings and buried in lines of passive-aggressive verse that could mean anything or everything. And yes, there is poetry. Bad poetry. Copious, rhyming, sometimes cringeworthy poetry. You spend hours composing couplets about the Lord's dimples or the way his boots creak ominously when he walks. Every attempt to be poetic runs the risk of turning tragic or ridiculous. Rhyming moon with soon sounds fine, until someone thinks you're plotting an elopement. Mention fire and suddenly you're being interrogated about torch safety regulations and last year's incident in the stables. Delivery is its own covert operation. You can't just leave a letter on a pillow. It might be discovered, read aloud, or worse, delivered to the wrong person. So you recruit help, a friendly kitchen boy, a sympathetic maid, or your one-eyed cat who enjoys lurking near suspicious doors. Sometimes you tuck notes into hollow candlesticks, or hide them behind loose stones in the wall. Other times, you feign dropping a handkerchief with a cleverly sewn-in message, praying the intended party finds it before the laundress does, and mistakes it for a failed embroidery experiment. But even when a letter lands where it should, the interpretation is never guaranteed. Your line, "I long for your company under moonlight's gaze," might be taken as romantic, poetic, or wildly inappropriate depending on the mood of the reader, and whether or not the lady of the house has already taken her evening wine. If the message is well received, you may get a note in return, often just as cryptic and twice as dramatic. These are not simple thank you cards. These are elaborate riddles that might include coded references to shared memories, fictional allegories, and occasionally suspiciously accurate summaries of that one time you tripped in the solar. When things go badly, the fallout is immediate and far-reaching. A misinterpreted line might lead to public accusations, frosty silences, or an impromptu sermon about moral decay delivered with extra vigour during Sunday Mass. You learn quickly that love in the castle is rarely private and never simple. Your words travel faster than you do, whispered by servants, speculated upon by fellow mistresses, and twisted into whatever version best fits the gossip of the day, and yet you keep writing. Because in this strange, overheated soap opera of a life, love notes are more than just communication, they're survival. A well-penned stanza can soothe tensions, shift suspicions, or simply make someone smile when they're not supposed to. You become fluent in subtext, an expert in euphemism, and a master of the backhanded compliment disguised as verse. And if all else fails, you blame the cat. She's been known to compose suspicious sonnets herself. It's not just the wife you worry about. There's always a rival, an ambitious servant, or a goat that gets more affection than you do. Everyone's watching, everyone's judging. Jealousy in the medieval manner is not a simple affair, it's more like a full-cast drama, staged in every hallway, corridor and courtyard. You quickly learn that being the only mistress in the house is about as likely as finding a loaf of bread without weevils. Somewhere, lurking just out of sight, is a rival. Maybe she's the mysterious guest from the previous season. Maybe she's a cousin sent to help with the embroidery. Maybe she's the steward's daughter, whose smile is just a little too wide and whose hair always looks suspiciously well brushed. But human competition is only part of the equation. The servants have a complicated relationship with you. Some are fiercely loyal, to your face anyway. Others are subtle saboteurs, waiting for you to trip so they can serve up a steaming plate of "I told you so." Every mistake you make is recorded, replayed and exaggerated in the kitchen, and your every triumph is greeted with a raised eyebrow and a comment about how even a stopped clock is right twice a day. There are alliances, rumours and, occasionally, outright pranks. One day your slippers are missing, the next you find your comb floating serenely in the washing tub. Is it malice? Is it mischief? Is it the goat? Ah, the goat. You thought it was a joke when the Lord gifted you livestock for your health. Now the goat is your main competition for affection, attention and leftovers. She follows you around, chews on your hem, and somehow manages to look more innocent than you do when caught somewhere you're not supposed to be. The servants love her. The children adore her. Even the Lord's wife has been caught sneaking her the good apples. You, meanwhile, are still trying to figure out why your pillow smells suspiciously of hay. Rival mistresses come and go, and each new arrival brings a fresh wave of paranoia. There's the sophisticated type, who quotes poetry in 3 languages and always seems to get the best seat at dinner. There's the demure one, who says little but listens to everything. There's the outgoing flirt, who laughs too loudly at the Lord's jokes and has already cornered the market on gifts and attention. Each one is a potential threat, and a potential scapegoat if things go sideways. You master the art of being cordial while simultaneously plotting your survival, all the while wondering if you too will someday be relegated to the remember when gossip of the scullery. The staff, of course, are watching all of this like it's their own personal soap opera. The kitchen maids place bets on who will receive the next trinket. The footmen report every whispered conversation. Even the priest seems oddly invested in who gets which seat at Sunday dinner. You do your best to remain gracious and unflappable, but the social hierarchy is a slippery slope. All it takes is a misstep, a wrong word, a bad hair day, a goat-related incident, and you're in danger of being outmaneuvered by someone with better connections or softer hands. You also become hyper-aware of every interaction, every compliment, every sideways glance. Is the Lord favouring someone else? Did the lady of the house just smile a little too kindly at the new maid? Was that joke about goats really just a joke? You spend half your day overanalyzing, the other half pretending you're above it all. Meanwhile, the goat wins Employee of the Month for the 3rd time running. By the end of your first season, you've developed a thick skin and a sharper sense of humour. Jealousy becomes a background hum, a part of life, like itchy wool or questionable stew. The trick isn't to conquer it, but to juggle it. Laugh when you can, let it roll off when you can't, and always keep an eye on the goat. Because in this household, you're never the only favourite for long. You're now a one-person support group for a man who's never been told no. Expect long nights listening to his political woes, family drama, and very weird dreams. Let's be honest. The romance part of being a medieval mistress is wildly overrated. Sure, the history books mention all the passion and poetry, but nobody writes about the hours you spend being an emotional sponge for a man who considers empathy to be a Latin verb. You're his confidant, his cheerleader, his therapist, and, when the mood strikes, a sounding board for his least impressive ideas. Your evenings start with a summons. The Lord appears in your doorway, his face a mask of noble stress and existential confusion. He sighs dramatically, takes off his hat with the kind of flair that says, "I once attended a tournament," and settles in for a session. Sometimes he brings wine. Sometimes he brings a list of grievances. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, he brings a lute. Your job? Listen attentively while he pours out his soul. You nod as he recounts every minor slight inflicted by rival nobles, every argument with his steward, and the ongoing drama of whether his 3rd cousin actually owes him a chicken, or just the promise of one. He tells you about his hopes and fears, most of which revolve around taxes, horses, and how nobody truly appreciates the burden of running a small estate in a hostile climate. Political complaints are just the beginning. Once he's warmed up, he moves on to family matters. There's the cousin who borrowed a falcon and never returned it. The aunt who keeps suggesting he marry her daughter. Again. The brother who gambled away his inheritance on a rigged dice game, and now writes weekly letters requesting temporary loans. You sit there, pretending to care deeply about people you've never met and will never meet, all while calculating whether you can sneak a nap without being noticed. The real test of your patience comes when he shares his dreams. Literal dreams. Last night I was riding a swan through the marketplace, and you were there, but you were also my mother, and there was a giant cheese wheel rolling after us. What does it mean? You have no idea. You suspect it means he ate too much spiced bread before bed, but you say something vague and supportive like, "Perhaps it's a sign of prosperity, my lord." He nods, satisfied. You resist the urge to ask for hazard pay. Of course, this emotional labour is a one-way street. Try sharing your own worries, and he'll either offer you a pearl of wisdom, just stop worrying, or change the subject to the latest gossip about the bishop's new hat. If you mention feeling unappreciated, he'll look genuinely perplexed. Isn't your room warm? Didn't he give you that goat? He simply cannot fathom that emotional support is a 2-person job. This is a recurring theme. No matter how many times you listen, comfort, or offer helpful advice, it's never enough to fix anything. There's always another problem, another worry, another emotional mess for you to sweep up and quietly dispose of. The Lord gets the comfort of your attention. You get the privilege of his unfiltered stream of consciousness, often accompanied by snoring. And let's not forget the aftermath. Once the Lord is done unburdening himself, he feels lighter. You, on the other hand, are left wide awake, replaying every awkward confession and wondering how much worse tomorrow's session will be. The next morning, nobody thanks you for your invisible labour. You just go about your day, a little more tired, a little more convinced that you could probably open a practice if medieval therapy ever becomes a thing. By the end of your first month, you've become an expert at listening without judgment, nodding on cue, and offering comfort where none will be returned. It's not the role you asked for, but it's yours nonetheless. Because in the medieval world, someone's got to be the emotional cleanup crew, and it turns out it's you. Every sermon is about you, or at least it feels like it. Priests glare, neighbours whisper, and you consider pretending you're just really, really lost. In medieval society, the church is everywhere. Over your shoulder, in your bedroom, and definitely inside your guilty conscience. For a mistress, the official position of the church is somewhere between object lesson and walking, talking cautionary tale. Every Sunday, as the bells toll and the villagers shuffle into the stone chapel, you feel the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down on you, like a particularly heavy velvet cloak. Sitting in the back pew, you try to shrink into your borrowed shawl, but it's no use. The priest is already eyeing you from the pulpit, warming up for a fiery sermon on the perils of sin, the dangers of vanity, and the spiritual rot that sets in when people forsake the sacred vows of marriage for worldly pleasures. He never says your name. He doesn't have to. The congregation already knows the subtext, and the local baker's wife is practically craning her neck to see if you'll burst into flames at the mention of temptresses. It isn't just the sermons either. Daily life is a minefield of religious reminders that you, personally, are doing everything wrong. The local friar appears at your door with pointed offers of prayer. The old women in the village cross themselves every time you walk by, then whisper prayers under their breath, just loud enough for you to hear. Children are hustled away if you're spotted at the well. Even the manor staff have perfected the art of dropping little hints. A devotional pamphlet left on your pillow, a particularly loud recitation of "Lead us not into temptation" outside your door at dawn. You start to see judgment everywhere. At dinner, if you laugh too loudly or smile at the wrong person, the chaplain's gaze hardens, as if trying to exercise your sense of humour on the spot. You find yourself avoiding eye contact in the corridors, especially with the lady of the house, who seems to pray with extra fervour whenever you're in the room. Even the family goat, who was never baptised and is definitely living in sin, seems to stare at you with quiet accusation. But it's not just about piety. Church disapproval is the ticket to instant social stigma. Being labelled sinful means doors close, rumours multiply and allies turn to bystanders. The market vendors suddenly run out of their best bread when you approach. The village healer suggests you try a little more prayer and a little less living. Even the local cats seem to have joined a judgmental feline conspiracy. You try to compensate by being extra helpful, donating to the alms box, attending every feast day mass, and memorising the psalms just in case you're tested on the spot. Nothing works. You're still the scandal, the story whispered by candlelight. It's as if medieval society expects you to repent simply by looking a little sadder every day. Any hint of happiness is proof you haven't learned your lesson. It's exhausting, and you briefly consider faking a pilgrimage just to get a break from the side eyes and pointed coughs. Still, you develop coping mechanisms. When the priest launches into a particularly pointed sermon, you count ceiling beams or recite embroidery patterns in your head. When villagers cross themselves, you offer a sweet but vague smile, as if you're a visiting dignitary from the land of questionable morals. You become an expert in looking appropriately penitent, while quietly plotting your next escape to the manor garden, where at least the birds don't judge. By the end of your first season, you understand that surviving church disapproval isn't about convincing anyone you're good. It's about enduring until someone else makes a bigger mistake. In a world obsessed with sin, you're never truly forgiven, but at least you're never bored. And if all else fails, you can always claim you're just really, really lost. Welcome to the science of good luck. Your options are medieval herbal remedies, a lot of prayers, and the absolute certainty that none of them work. You may have heard that love in the Middle Ages was risky business, and nowhere is this truer than in the shadowy world of medieval birth control. Forget everything you know about modern family planning. There's no reliable method, no user-friendly pamphlet, and no helpful pharmacist in a discreet white coat. There is only a collection of wild herbs, whispered advice, and desperate hope, delivered with all the confidence of a weather forecast given by someone who's never actually seen a cloud. Let's start with the herbs. Every household has a wise woman, part apothecary, part local gossip, who swears by a rotating selection of leaves and roots. Pennyroyal, Queen Anne's lace, rue, and wild carrot seeds are the stars of the show, each prescribed with a wink and the implicit warning that, at best, you'll end up with a stomachache. At worst, well, medieval medicine is not known for its commitment to safety testing. If you're brave or desperate, you choke down a cup of boiled concoction so bitter it could strip the enamel from a dragon's teeth. The instructions are vague, the measurements are imprecise, and the side effects are a roll of the dice. Of course, herbal remedies are only the start. There's also the time-honoured tradition of timing, which, in medieval parlance, means crossing your fingers, holding your breath, and hoping for a miracle. Some ladies try complicated rituals involving moon phases, prayers, or standing on one leg while reciting a psalm. If all else fails, you can always visit the local shrine and light an extra candle to St. Catherine, patroness of women who are trying not to make things worse. The saints, it seems, are very busy. If you're feeling especially pious, you can double down on the Hail Marys. Church doctrine is clear. Any attempt at birth control is, at best, frowned upon, and, at worst, heresy. Which means all your preventive measures must be strictly between you, your trusted maid, and the family goat, who will never tell, but always look sceptical. Priests warn of dire consequences, spiritual, social, and sometimes suspiciously medical. Every time you enter the chapel, you half expect the ceiling to fall in as divine retribution for drinking that mysterious herbal tonic. The worst part? Even if you manage to keep your precautions secret, there's absolutely no guarantee of success. The medieval world is a land of surprises, and the appearance of an unexpected baby is the kind of plot twist everyone's waiting for. Should you find yourself in this situation, you'll be treated to a crash course in public shaming, endless gossip and unsolicited advice from every old woman within a 10-mile radius. Oh, another little one. How unexpected, they'll coo, with the barely concealed glee of people who saw it coming a mile away. On the rare chance your methods work, read sheer luck, you get to enjoy a brief anxious peace until the next time. There's always the underlying suspicion that maybe, just maybe, you've angered the fertility gods by not immediately naming a child after your patron's great-aunt. Or perhaps you've used too much rue and not enough prayer. Either way, it's a cycle of constant uncertainty, herbal experiments, and the eternal hope that this month, at least, you'll stay out of the maternity drama. Of course, all of this is complicated by the fact that you're not exactly allowed to talk openly about any of it. The topic of birth control is cloaked in euphemism, sidelong glances, and careful silences. Advice is exchanged in code, often by candlelight, and you become adept at interpreting the most innocent-sounding conversations for secret meaning. By the end of your medieval mistress career, you'll have learned a lot about the limits of science, the power of hope, and the unpredictable nature of herbal remedies. You'll also have developed a deep appreciation for the simple phrase, "Not tonight, I have a headache." In the end, medieval birth control is mostly an exercise in faith. Faith in herbs, luck, and your ability to keep a straight face when someone suggests standing on your head. If you have a child, congratulations. Now things are really complicated. If you don't, people assume you have a secret tunnel to the apothecary. The topic of children is one of those conversation mines you tiptoe around in the medieval manner. On paper, your role as a mistress is to be charming, decorative, and, if you're especially fortunate, discreetly fertile. But reality, as always, has a way of complicating things. If you're childless, the rumours swirl like smoke. The servants whisper that you're either cursed, barren, or a practising alchemist with a suspicious knowledge of herbs. The kitchen maids swap stories about how you never gain weight and always decline extra stew. By week 3, you're starting to wonder if you should start carrying a fake baby around just to keep the peace. But let's say you do have a child, or several. Instantly, your career as a mistress becomes less romance novel, more royal soap opera. Who's the father? That's the question everyone wants to ask but pretends not to. If the child looks like the Lord, it's cause for gossip, not celebration. The lady of the house is suddenly very interested in genealogy, and every relative within riding distance has their own theory, loudly announced over dinner. If your child looks suspiciously like anyone else, a squire, a travelling minstrel, or heaven forbid the goat, things spiral into full-scale palace intrigue. Raising a child as a mistress is a logistical challenge on par with planning a siege. There's no guarantee of security, affection, or even acknowledgement. Sometimes your little ones are shuttled off to the countryside, raised by sympathetic relatives, or tucked away in a conveniently distant nunnery or monastery. Other times they're raised in the manor, but always at a polite distance from the official children. Your son is called the clever boy from the West Wing. Your daughter is the one with the curly hair who's always underfoot. It's the medieval equivalent of being just friends. The real circus begins when inheritance is involved. Every child, legitimate or not, is a pawn on the chessboard of medieval politics. The Lord may shower your offspring with gifts one day, and ignore them the next, depending on his mood, the alignment of the stars, or whether he's lost at cards. Everyone has an opinion on who should inherit what, and the more potential heirs floating around the manor, the messier things become. Your little ones quickly learn to keep their heads down and their stories straight. There's also the not-so-small matter of education. Officially, your children may not be in line for anything, but you're expected to give them the best upbringing your delicate position can afford. That means they get the leftovers from the tutors, hand-me-down lessons in Latin and lute playing, and possibly a crash course in how to avoid being poisoned by a jealous cousin. The real curriculum, though, is social navigation, how to smile at the right people, when to stay invisible, and the art of pretending you don't know your father's real job title. Meanwhile, everyone you meet has advice on how to handle the kid's question. The priest will urge you to repent, the healer will recommend boiled nettle tea, and the local matchmaker will try to marry you off to anyone with 2 working hands and a vague sense of morality. Even the family goat seems judgmental, eyeing your brood with the suspicion of someone who's seen too many scandals unfold by moonlight. If you're lucky, your children grow up healthy, clever, and maybe even happy. If you count happiness as a working knowledge of intrigue and an aversion to lace collars. If not, well, at least they'll have enough material to write a best-selling tragedy someday. By the end of your time as a medieval mistress, you learn that the kid's question never really goes away. It just gets louder, more tangled, and occasionally much funnier. Whether you have 1 child, 5, or none at all, someone's always speculating, and you, as always, are left juggling motherhood, mayhem, and the world's most complicated paternity shuffle. Feeling sick, you'll be treated to boiled onions, holy relics, and the occasional bloodletting. Most illnesses are treated with equal parts superstition and complete indifference. Welcome to the medieval manners healthcare system, a collection of ancient rituals, herbal remedies, and the medical wisdom of people who still believe the Black Death was caused by an unlucky wind. As a mistress, you might imagine a certain level of pampering when you fall ill. A gentle hand to your forehead, a soft voice whispering, "Rest, dear, and I'll fetch the finest apothecary in the land." Instead, prepare for a lot of onions, prayers, and advice from everyone except an actual doctor. Let's start with the basics. The moment you sneeze, a servant rushes to inform the entire household. Suddenly, you're the main event. The cook appears with a bowl of soup so garlicky it could kill a vampire, or at least everyone's appetite for the next week. Someone suggests you wear a clove of garlic around your neck. Another recommends tying a dead toad to your wrist, and the chambermaid brings a jar of goose fat just in case. By the end of the day, you smell like an herb garden after a thunderstorm, and you're not sure if you feel better or just busier. If your illness lingers, it's time to bring out the real medical artillery, leeches. Nothing says "get well soon" like having half a dozen small, eager leeches attached to your skin, all in the name of restoring your humours. The local barber surgeon, whose main qualifications are enthusiasm and a collection of suspiciously stained rags, will assure you this is standard practice. He also doubles as the village dentist, midwife, and occasional gravedigger. There's nothing quite like the comfort of knowing your healthcare provider's motto is, "First, do something." Should you survive the leeches, you'll graduate to bloodletting. This is the medieval equivalent of turning it off and on again. Have a headache? Bloodletting. Sore throat? More bloodletting. Existential dread from being a medieval mistress? You guessed it. Bloodletting. You sit on a hard wooden stool clutching a towel, while the barber surgeon cheerfully nicks your arm and collects a few ounces of your future in a ceramic bowl. If you're lucky, you only faint once. Of course, not all care is so hands-on. A big part of medieval medicine is faith, both in God and in the healing powers of whatever holy relics are closest to hand. A lock of a saint's hair, a scrap of tunic, or a chipped bone from a legendary martyr. These are the real heavy hitters. You're encouraged to sleep with them under your pillow, drink water they've touched, or just stare at them while thinking healthy thoughts. If you recover, it's a miracle. If not, you clearly didn't believe hard enough. When all else fails, advice flows in from every direction, qualified or not. The laundress swears by honey and vinegar. The stable boy recommends a brisk walk and thinking less. The priest recommends more prayer and possibly less thinking in general. The lady of the house will offer you a complex herbal tea, but not before sharing her theory that you've been struck down by envy, bad manners, or the evil eye of a kitchen maid who dislikes your embroidery. Even the family goat gets in on the act, looking at you with an expression that suggests you might want to try eating more grass. Recovery is an ambiguous event. If you get better, everyone claims their remedy was the one that worked, and you're expected to express your gratitude by attending extra church services. If you don't, the consensus is that you weren't trying hard enough, or perhaps you're simply not cut out for the medieval lifestyle. Either way, the whole process leaves you wishing for a warm bath, a nap, and an age when doctor doesn't mean part-time blacksmith. By the end of your illness, you'll have tried everything. Onions, leeches, relics, and relentless optimism. And if you do survive, you'll understand why most medieval people believed in miracles. Sometimes, it's the only explanation for making it through another day. One day you're in, the next you're out, literally. There's always a new favourite waiting in the wings. Your exit interview is just someone tossing your suitcase out a window. Medieval careers have a way of ending abruptly, but none quite so dramatically as the life of a mistress. It's a high-wire act from the very beginning, and no matter how carefully you balance, all it takes is a single misstep, or the appearance of someone younger, wittier, or with more impressive ankles, for you to find yourself plummeting from the precarious perch of beloved companion to yesterday's news. In a world with no HR department and no severance package, your time is up the moment someone else winks in the right direction. There's rarely any warning. One day you're being showered with compliments and the occasional aggressively perfumed handkerchief. The next, you're being met with chilly indifference and whispers behind every tapestry. You might notice the signs. The Lord grows distant. The gifts dwindle. The kitchen staff suddenly refer to you as the other one. The lady of the house, once cold but predictable, now has a certain glint in her eye. It's the look of someone who's already started planning what to do with your old room and has a waiting list of applicants. The fall from grace can take many forms. Sometimes it's a slow fade, where you're simply not invited to dinners, not mentioned in conversations, not asked for your opinion on whether eel pie is a good idea. Hint, it never is. Other times it's the medieval equivalent of a workplace firing, a hasty suggestion that perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the family's country manor, preferably several days' ride away, and ideally with no forwarding address. If you're really unlucky, your belongings are packed up by someone else and sent on ahead. If you're unluckier still, your belongings are divided among the staff as consolation prizes. There's also the spectacle factor. Court life thrives on drama, and nothing gets tongues wagging like the abrupt removal of a mistress. Servants hustle in the corridors, the priest drops by with suspicious frequency, and even the family goat seems unusually judgmental. Rumours spread faster than the Black Death. Did you anger the lady of the house? Did you offend a powerful guest? Did you finally speak your mind at dinner, or was it just your turn to lose at the grand game of musical chairs? The exit itself is rarely dignified. If you're lucky, you leave with your dignity, a handful of trinkets you manage to hide, and a half-eaten loaf of bread for the road. If you're unlucky, you're shown the door so fast you barely have time to say goodbye to your favourite hiding spots. There is no farewell party, no heartfelt thank you, just a chilly breeze as the heavy door swings shut behind you. Medieval breakups are above all efficient. The aftermath is its own special ordeal. Your social standing plummets. Those who once envied your position now look at you with the pity reserved for people who lose at dice and public foot races. If you're smart, you'll move quickly. Find a distant cousin to stay with, a sympathetic innkeeper, or a friendly nunnery that's low on questions. Some former mistresses reinvent themselves as herbalists or storytellers. Others fade into the background, hoping their story becomes less interesting with time. Still, every fall from grace is also a crash course in survival. You learn to pack light, trust little, and always have an escape plan, preferably one that doesn't involve a goat or a public square. It's a reminder that, in a world where affection is as fickle as the wind and fortunes change overnight, resilience isn't just an asset, it's your only guarantee. So if you ever find yourself suddenly out, remember, it's not personal, it's just medieval office politics. And with luck, you'll land on your feet, preferably somewhere the tapestries don't whisper your name. Bad harvest? Political trouble? The first luxury to go is you. Suddenly you're pawned off to a friend, or given a suspiciously generous amount of cheese to leave town. Being a medieval mistress is risky, but nothing makes your position more precarious than the Lord's bank account taking a nosedive. It turns out, when times are tough, you're not just an accessory, you're a very negotiable asset. If the harvest fails or the local baron decides to collect on a decade's worth of friendly debts, the manor's first cost-cutting measure isn't downsizing the stables or trimming the candle budget, it's seeing how quickly they can offload you with as little scandal as possible. The first sign something's wrong is the sudden shift in atmosphere. Servants stop making eye contact. Meals become noticeably plainer, where once you enjoyed roast duck and imported honey, now it's turnips and a slice of yesterday's bread if you're lucky. The gifts dry up, the compliments turn half-hearted, and the Lord's laughter at your jokes is replaced by long, distracted sighs. He's too busy brooding over ledgers and sending nervous glances to the window, as if expecting a mob of tax collectors to march up the drive. The real red flag comes when he starts inviting wealthy friends over for dinner, friends who are suspiciously single or recently widowed, and who spend a little too much time discussing the virtues of companionship and flexibility in hard times. Suddenly, you're being introduced to merchants, distant cousins, and knights with dodgy reputations, each one more awkward than the last. There are subtle hints that you might enjoy the city or find the countryside restorative, always delivered with a hopeful smile and a generous chunk of cheese wrapped in a cloth for your journey. If the situation is especially dire, negotiations begin. You might be offered as a companion to a neighbouring noble who appreciates lively conversation, meaning he needs someone to cheer him up while he sells off the family silver. Sometimes the arrangement is a loan. You're to stay for the season and return when, presumably, the manor's fortunes improve. If you protest, the Lord mumbles about temporary measures and assures you it's all in your best interest. It's hard to argue with someone who's just handed you a suspiciously generous parting gift and is already looking out the window for the next solution. Other times, you're not so much pawned as politely ejected. The manor is suddenly overrun with accountants, and your room is needed for storage. The family goat is offered your old mattress. You're sent off with promises of regular correspondence, and enough cheese and onions to start a stall at the market. The lady of the house, who always seemed one step away from open conflict, now gives you a tight, almost sympathetic smile. She's seen this cycle before. Socially, your situation doesn't improve. Once word gets out that you've been let go, the rumour mill goes into overdrive. Did you cause the bad luck? Are you a sign of divine disfavour? The villagers watch you pack, the servants avoid your gaze, and even the cook, who once slipped you the good pies, offers only an awkward wave goodbye. There's no farewell feast, just a quiet exit and a quick reshuffling of priorities. If you're savvy, you plan your next move before the cheese is gone. Maybe you find a new patron, maybe you reinvent yourself as a travelling healer, or even a bard with a tragic backstory. If you're lucky, you end up somewhere with warm fires and less judgment. If not, well, at least you've learned that in medieval economics, love is always the first thing to be downsized. By the end of it, you realise that your place in the manor was never quite as secure as you'd hoped. But you also discover a knack for resourcefulness, and maybe, just maybe, a taste for independence that no amount of bad harvest can take away. There's no 401k. If you're lucky, you marry a lesser noble. If you're unlucky, it's a life of prayer, poverty, or hiding in a town where nobody recognises your face from last year's scandal. The end of a medieval mistress's career is less a grand send-off and more a choose-your-own-adventure with suspiciously few happy endings. When the invitations dry up, the Lord loses interest, or the winds of fortune change, you're suddenly faced with the question, what now? Spoiler alert, there's no severance package and definitely no thank you note. Let's start with the most respectable option, the nunnery. For centuries, convents have been the catch-all solution for any noblewoman or ex-mistress who's worn out her welcome. Life in the cloister means days filled with prayer, laundry and cold stone floors, plus the dubious comfort of knowing you'll never have to dodge a jealous wife again. Your daily schedule is rigid. Prayers before dawn, more prayers after breakfast, needlework, a single meal, more prayers, and an early bedtime enforced by the Mother Superior's stare. Social life is limited to hushed conversations in the garden and the occasional ex-mistress support group among the old nuns. On the plus side, no fleas in your velvet and very little chance of being traded for cheese. If you lack the noble connections or piety to secure a spot in a convent, the outlook is bleaker. Some former mistresses end up begging on the streets, trading court gossip for coins or scraps of bread. Your stories, once entertaining in the manor halls, now serve as cautionary tales for wide-eyed children and nosy vendors. You learn the best corners to avoid the town constable, how to look sufficiently pitiful without drawing unwanted attention, and most importantly, how to spot when a particularly nosy former acquaintance is about to pass by. The city is a jungle, but at least it's anonymous. There's also the option of strategic disappearance. This path is favoured by those with a bit of cunning and a flair for dramatic exits. Maybe you change your name, cut your hair, and set off for a town where nobody remembers you from last year's winter festival debacle. You invent a backstory: widow, recently bereaved, or cousin of a minor merchant from a far-off shire. With any luck, you blend in with the crowd, find honest work as a seamstress, healer, or even an innkeeper, and build a modest, peaceful life. Of course, you're always looking over your shoulder, just in case someone recognises your laugh, or, worse, the goat you once considered your only friend. If you're among the fortunate few, retirement may mean marriage, a respectable match, to a less noble or prosperous merchant who's willing to overlook your colourful history in exchange for charm and a working knowledge of court etiquette. These unions are less about love and more about mutual survival. Your new life is quieter, the rules simpler, and your responsibilities involve keeping the peace, raising children, and pretending you've never heard the phrase court scandal. Of course, medieval society never really lets you forget your past. Wherever you go, there's always a risk that someone will recognise your face, recall a story, or mention your name at the wrong moment. You become adept at dodging questions, deflecting curiosity, and mastering the art of the strategic subject change. The lessons learned in the manor, how to stay invisible when necessary, how to be charming without being noticed, become essential survival tools. In the end, retirement is a bittersweet mixture of relief and regret. You trade velvet and jewels for rough wool and anonymity, but you gain freedom from the exhausting intrigues of court life. You learn to find comfort in simpler pleasures, quiet evenings, honest work, and the sweet anonymity of a new beginning. No, there's no pension plan for mistresses, but there is life after scandal, and sometimes, if you're lucky, or just very stubborn, you get to write your own final chapter. Or at least, you get to disappear before anyone else writes it for you. After all the scheming, the drama, and the existential dread, you find yourself staring into the candle. Maybe you dream of true love. Maybe you just hope for a hot bath and a day without fleas. It's in these quiet moments, when the bustle of the manor fades to a low hush, and the fire has burned down to a whisper, that the life of a medieval mistress reveals its softer, more complicated side. Candlelight has a way of stripping away the illusions. You're not the glamorous portrait in someone's great hall, or the whispered rumour behind closed doors. You're just you, a little older, a little wiser, and maybe a little sadder, with only the flickering shadow of your own hand for company. There's a peculiar peace in the late-night stillness. You remember how once upon a time you believed in romance as something grand and sweeping, filled with stolen glances and endless possibilities. Now, you know that love is messier, tangled up with duty, risk, and the nagging worry that tomorrow will bring another round of surprises. You've seen the truth behind the tapestries, the power games, the sudden reversals of fortune, the dizzying highs and gut-wrenching lows of being someone's secret, in a world that loves its secrets far too much. Regret creeps in, as it does for everyone who's had to live by their wits. You remember the moments you spoke too sharply, or not at all, the friends you lost, the alliances that vanished, the small betrayals that never quite leave you. There are nights you wish you'd chosen differently, a quieter life, a steadier love, a job with better benefits and fewer goats. But even regret is a luxury. In your world, survival takes all your cleverness and all your heart. You think about the other women you've met on this strange path. Some thrived, most endured, a few vanished, and all of them left behind stories that slip through the manor like smoke. Sometimes you imagine finding them again, somewhere far from here, sitting together by the fire and laughing about the absurdities, the secret rooms, the terrible perfume, the way a single word at dinner could change the shape of your whole life. There's comfort in knowing you're not the only one who's ever felt lost, or lonely, or desperately in need of a proper pillow. Yet, for all the uncertainty and dashed hopes, the candle's glow kindles a stubborn little flame of hope. Maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe the Lord will notice something true in you, not just what you pretend to be. Maybe the lady of the house will finally let down her guard, and you'll find a way to coexist as something more than rivals. Maybe, just maybe, the world will shift in some small, merciful way. A moment of laughter, a shared secret, or the simple gift of an untroubled morning. You dream, sometimes, of escape. Not from the manner, but from the weight of expectation. A new life, somewhere nobody knows your name or your past, where you can be more than someone's hidden shadow. You imagine love without conditions, friendship without calculation, and rest without fear of what tomorrow will bring. Sometimes you even let yourself believe it's possible. For now, though, you watch the candle gutter and listen to the wind in the old stones. You take comfort in the tiny victories, the day you made the whole hall laugh, the meal you managed to enjoy, the secret you kept just for yourself. You're still here, still hoping, still dreaming. And maybe that, in the end, is the greatest rebellion, daring to want more, to wish for better, and to believe against all odds that somewhere out there is a future brighter than this tired old candle. Because even in a world of shadows, a little hope can carry you a very long way. You want to look your best, but medieval beauty is mostly hazardous materials and questionable advice. Face powder is made from lead, eyeliner from soot, and lipstick from something you'd rather not Google. The only thing more toxic than your makeup is the castle gossip. Every day in the manor starts with a battle in front of a wobbly mirror. It's not vanity, it's survival. You know the lady of the house is already on her 4th prayer and 3rd layer of face paste, and the kitchen maids will take mental notes on your complexion before you've even left your room. There are no tutorials, just a hand-me-down bag of cosmetics that could double as evidence in a future murder investigation. Start with the face powder. Forget blush and bronzer. Pale is the goal, because apparently the less you look like you've ever worked a day in your life, the more attractive you are. The favoured ingredient? Lead. That's right. You're painting your face with slow poison, carefully dusting your cheeks while pretending not to notice the lingering metallic taste on your tongue. Every so often, you wonder if your new glow is actual radiance or just your skin quietly giving up. For colour, you reach for a tiny pot of rouge, which might be made from crushed beetles, brick dust, or that mysterious jar labelled carmine that no one dares to open. The instructions, if any, are dab lightly and pray. The goal is to look fresh, as though you just returned from a brisk walk and not a 3-hour anxiety spiral about candle placement at dinner. The real challenge is avoiding streaks that make you look more plague survivor than blushing beauty. Eyeliner is the next ordeal. Forget soft pencils and creamy gels. You dip a splintered stick into soot, burnt cork, or even ground up antimony, another heavy metal, because why stop at lead? The effect is striking. Wide, dramatic eyes, worthy of a Byzantine mosaic. Or, if your hand slips, the raccoon-eyed look of someone startled awake in the middle of a goat stampede. Either way, people notice, and not always kindly. As for your lips, you have options, none of them reassuring. Some formulas involve red ochre, others dried flowers or berries, and a few require animal fat. There's even a rumour about mixing sheep's wool with wine to achieve a youthful stain. The colour lasts until your first nervous sip of wine, and then it's back to the drawing board, or the nearest herb garden if you're desperate for a fresh tint. The real test, of course, is keeping it all in place. Medieval makeup has a half-life shorter than a court scandal. The moment you step outside, the wind does its worst, smudging, smearing, and, if it's humid, melting everything down your jawline like medieval candle wax. If it rains, you're doomed. Your carefully crafted look is now a river of sorrow, best appreciated from a safe distance. Then there are the unintended side effects. Soot in your eyes, lead in your pores, and rouge that sometimes turns your cheeks a suspicious shade of green. If you're lucky, you escape with just an itch. If you're not, you join the ranks of women who can't figure out why their eyebrows keep falling out, or why their smiles look more haunted every month. The household healers will tell you it's the vapours, but you know it's just Tuesday in the makeup mirror. Naturally, this daily ritual doesn't escape the attention of castle gossip. The kitchen staff speculate about your unnatural pallor. The laundress gossips about your mysterious stains, and the stable boy claims your eyeliner is witchcraft. The lady of the house might copy your look, until she decides it's sinful and reverts to her own personal blend of chalk dust and smugness. Yet, In the end, you persist. You dab, powder and paint, knowing the whole routine is as much armour as artistry. It's less about impressing the Lord and more about holding your own in the daily battle of status and survival. In the world of medieval mistresses, looking good is hazardous work, so you may as well laugh through the fumes and hope nobody asks what's really in your beauty routine. Between chores, awkward encounters, and constant vigilance, sleep is both a luxury and an Olympic sport. You grab naps whenever and wherever you can, behind a curtain, in a hayloft, or pretending to be deep in prayer. Being a mistress means always being tired and never being caught. It turns out the real secret to surviving as a medieval mistress isn't charm, wit, or even having the best gossip. It's knowing how to sleep with one eye open and a foot always ready to kick your shoes back on. While the poets of the age wrote endless verses about midnight trysts and whispered confessions, the true romance is with your pillow, if you're ever lucky enough to find one. Your nights are often restless, haunted by the echo of distant arguments, creaky stairs, and the haunting certainty that someone is always listening, always judging. So you become a master of the micronap. After all, you're required to look radiant at dinner, attentive in the Lord's company, invisible in the lady's presence, and alert enough to dodge incoming candlesticks, all while your body quietly dreams of collapsing into a real bed, in a real room, without the threat of being called to just one more late-night conversation. Morning comes with the rooster's crow, a sound you're convinced is personal. Breakfast is followed by idle hours, which are neither idle nor truly hours, filled with forced embroidery and pretending to read a Latin text while your eyelids beg for mercy. The trick is to time your nap opportunities to moments when the house is at its most distracted. You memorise the rhythms of the manor, when the Lord is out hunting, when the lady retreats to her prayers, when the kitchen is too busy scrubbing pots to care about who's snoozing in the linen closet. The locations are as strategic as the timing. Sometimes you disappear behind a tapestry, clutching a folded cloak, listening for approaching footsteps while you snatch a few precious minutes of sleep. The hayloft is another favourite. If you can get past the smell and avoid the goat, it's private enough for a decent nap and soft enough to leave only minimal straw in your hair. On cold days, you wedge yourself into a sunbeam near the upper gallery, feigning deep religious contemplation until your chin bobs onto your chest. If anyone asks, you're meditating on the transience of life. The art of the strategic nap also means cultivating allies. A friendly chambermaid will warn you if the lady of the house is on the prowl. The laundry woman can be counted on to invent a spilled ink emergency that explains your absence. In return, you swap secrets, trinkets, or the occasional fresh-baked bun. It's a small price to pay for 5 minutes of blissful unconsciousness. Of course, sometimes you're caught. The consequences range from a knowing smirk, long night was it, to a scolding about sloth and setting a bad example for the servants. You develop a repertoire of excuses, headache, prayers, practicing your look of devotion. You even perfect the art of waking instantly, mouth already forming a plausible apology before your eyes are fully open. And then there are the missed opportunities, the times you almost nap but don't. Someone always needs something, or bursts in with urgent news about a missing brooch or a suspiciously empty cheese platter. You become so accustomed to broken sleep that your dreams develop an intermission, politely pausing while you nod through a lute recital or another tedious dinner. Yet, despite the exhaustion, there's a kind of pride in your stealthy sleeping. In a manner filled with politics, prying eyes, and constant demands, carving out moments of rest is an act of rebellion. It's proof that no matter how much is expected of you, you still belong to yourself, if only for a few drowsy minutes at a time. So you master the art of napping with style, secrecy, and a touch of defiance. After all, tomorrow will be just as exhausting, and in a world like this, even dreams have to be clever to survive. Flirting in the medieval world is a subtle dance involving glances, veiled compliments, and the occasional dropped handkerchief. Unfortunately, every gesture has a 50-50 chance of being interpreted as undying love or an invitation to duel. The stakes, eternal embarrassment, Forget texting, dating apps, or even direct conversation. Medieval flirting is less about expressing interest and more about conducting a top-secret operation with a high risk of being exposed by the wrong sneeze. Your tools are limited. A fan, a well-timed wink, and a supply of ambiguous compliments. Your obstacles? Everyone else's prying eyes, a code of etiquette so strict it could choke a bishop, and the ever-present risk that your subtle hint will spark a minor civil war. It starts with eye contact, but not the modern, confident kind. This is the look away, then look back, then pretend you are admiring the tapestry's school of romance. A glance too long and you're the talk of the dinner table. A glance too short and you're standoffish. You learn to master the art of the slow blink, the sideways smile and the discreet sigh, each deployed like a carefully aimed arrow, and all of them open to wild misinterpretation. Fans and handkerchiefs are the preferred props of the elite flirt. Drop a handkerchief at the right moment and it's a message. At the wrong moment, it's an invitation for every nobleman in the room to lunge for it like you've just thrown the bouquet at a royal wedding. Waving a fan can mean anything from "come hither" to "the roast is overcooked," depending on the angle and the audience. The lady of the house has her own fan language, which seems mostly to communicate "back off, peasant," but you're still trying to decode it. Compliments must be offered sparingly and always with plausible deniability. Your wit outshines the candles, you might say. If he's clever, he'll preen. If not, he'll assume you're talking about the candles. On rare occasions, you're forced to deploy the nuclear option. A compliment about someone's lute playing, even if the strings are so out of tune that the family goat howls in protest. Flattery is a science, but one that often explodes in your face. Of course, every move you make is monitored by an audience of bored servants, suspicious wives, and professional gossips. Drop your gaze at the wrong moment, and it's whispered you're hiding forbidden feelings. Laugh at a joke that isn't funny, and the room goes quiet, then erupts in speculation about which eligible bachelor you're hoping to ensnare. It's less a game of love and more a series of booby-trapped conversation pits. Then there are the disasters, flirtations that spiral wildly out of control. A wink misfired in the direction of the wrong cousin. A hand accidentally brushed in the breadline, now the subject of 3 separate ballads and a cautionary poem. Once you tried to compliment a knight's poetry and accidentally suggested you'd like to see his sword collection. He proposed marriage on the spot. You spent the next week hiding in the orchard. Duels are a real possibility, usually sparked by misunderstandings over a nod or a compliment gone astray. You learn quickly to apologise for everything, smile sweetly, and deny any knowledge of romantic intentions. Oh, that look! I was admiring the woodwork. The handkerchief. Butterfingers, you know. You keep your admirers at arm's length, not just to maintain your dignity, but to avoid being the subject of the next cautionary tale shared over spiced wine. In time, you develop a sixth sense for when to flirt and when to freeze. You practice the ancient art of ambiguous conversation, perfect the distracted laugh, and adopt the "did I say that?" eyebrow arch. You collect stories of romantic disasters from other mistresses, swapping tips on how to exit a room without leaving your dignity behind. By the end of the season, you're still tired, still under constant surveillance, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit better at the medieval science of flirting. The only certainty? Eternal embarrassment, and enough awkward stories to last you through every long winter's night. The Lord's dogs eat better than you. The castle cat owns the warmest chair. Even pigeons get more courtesy. You, meanwhile, hope nobody mistakes you for the new kitchen maid. At least the mice in your room don't pass judgment. You'd think being the Lord's mistress would guarantee a little pampering, but in the manners pecking order, you're somewhere below the dog and just above the broomstick if you're lucky. Animals here live in blissful luxury, oblivious to the social tightrope you walk. The Lord's hunting dogs are not ordinary mutts. They're groomed, pampered, and dined on cuts of meat you only see when there are leftovers. Their beds are fluffed, their collars jingling with tiny bells, and they're bathed more often than most of the staff. If you get a scrap of roast, it's only because the dogs are already full. Then there's the cat, a minor household deity. It claims the sunnier spots and best chairs, and no one dares disturb its nap, not even the lady. If the cat graces your lap, it's seen as fortune. If it ignores you, that's your problem. Its hairballs inspire more concern than your fevers, and it gets treats, brushing, and even priestly attention if it sneezes. Don't start on the birds. Pigeons live in their own tower, dining on a carefully chosen menu. The Lord admires them for hours. Even stray sparrows are treated gently. Once you got left outside in the rain because someone mistook you for the help. By contrast, the only pets truly on your level are the mice, silent, discreet and non-judgmental. You learn to value your own wit and resilience. After all, the cat's favour is fleeting. The mice and your dignity are worth more. So tonight, as you drift off, snuggled in your clean sheets, surrounded by silence and possibly a very judgmental cat, maybe spare a gentle thought for the medieval mistress. She survived days that would have turned most of us into walking cautionary tales, dodging jealous nobles, living in drafty towers, eating soup that was as mysterious as her career prospects, and performing emotional gymnastics worthy of a royal court jester. It wasn't just the boredom, the backstabbing, or the dangerously experimental beauty products that made her life so absurdly difficult. It was the constant need to stay one step ahead, to hold on to dignity, hope, and sometimes just her spot at dinner. For every silk dress, there were 10 awkward silences. For every trinket, 100 whispered rumours. And yet, through all the scheming, heartbreak and hay-filled mattresses she endured, history may remember queens and kings, but it's the everyday survivors, the invisible, the adaptable, the slightly sarcastic, who remind us just how stubbornly human people have always been. So tonight, be grateful for modern comforts, for privacy, hot water, and love that doesn't require a secret exit strategy. The fact that you don't have to explain your career to a room full of skeptical relatives at midnight is its own kind of luxury. Rest easy knowing that, unlike our medieval heroine, you probably won't be replaced by a cousin with better handwriting. Breathe in the peace, let the old candlelight of history flicker gently out, and dream of a world where drama stays on the page and not in your bedchamber. Good night. Sleep well. And remember, history may be messy, but at least you can change the sheets.